Against a backdrop of a vibrant Earth, a squadron of alien ships is halted by a bold declaration from humanity, banning the Galactic Empire from entering the planet's orbit. Grinding stone? Human space? Admiral Keffer's voice turned sharp. Child, there is no such thing. There's only Imperial space and the corners we have yet to conquer. I am Admiral Keffer of the Galactic Empire. You will surrender your planet and submit to Imperial authority within 72 hours. Refuse, and we take it by force. President Morgan's face didn't flicker. We reject your ultimatum. Earth is not for sale, not for lease, and not for the taking. Go expand your empire somewhere else. The transmission cut. Keffer stared at the spot where her image had hovered. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever spoken to him with such calm defiance. Most begged, wept, or bartered everything they owned. This human had addressed him like he was some petty thief. Perhaps they do not grasp our power, the comms officer offered. Then we will educate them, Keffer growled. Signal all fleet commanders. We strike in precisely 72 hours. Begin surveillance on every human population center. I want them to feel death approaching, to remember fear. Far below, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Lisa Morgan sat in a secure office buried in stone and steel. The room was unadorned. White walls, plain furnishings. No trophies, no glitter. Just purpose. 3 others sat at the table. Defense Secretary John Blake, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, with hands shaped by labor before politics. Lisa, he said quietly, we always knew this day would come. The question is, are we ready for what follows? Dr. Rachel Stone, Chief Science Advisor, younger than the rest, with tightly bound red hair and the weight of 15 years of secret research behind her, the quantum barrier network is operational. All outposts report full power and perfect sync. We can seal the solar system in under half an hour. Commander Alex Rivera, mid-40s, hardened and sharp. She led Earth's outer defense from Luna Station. 2 decades of Imperial war studies behind her eyes. Madam President, she warned, once the barrier's active, there's no reversing it. Any Imperial vessels inside the system will be trapped with us. We'll be severing ourselves from the galaxy. Lisa rose and walked to a screen showing Earth spinning in space. Cities sparkled like constellations across its shadowed surface. 3 billion people down there, living, working, trusting us to keep them safe. She paused. Tell me again why we can't just surrender. Dr. Stone opened a file on her tablet. Because surrender means slavery. We've studied the fate of willing species. Within 50 years, their cultures are erased. Our languages die. Their children are taken for imperial needs. The fortunate become laborers. The unfortunate. Food. John Blake nodded grimly. The Empire doesn't want allies. They want assets. They've done this to 2,000 civilizations. Remained free, Commander Rivera added. Our deep space monitors have tracked Imperial logistics for years. We know where the children go. We've seen the re-education centers. We know why entire species disappear from records. President Morgan turned from the screen. And if we resist and lose, they'll exterminate us, Rivera said flatly. The Empire makes examples of rebels. But if we activate the barrier and cost them something, they'll bleed. Maybe it'll inspire others. Dr. Stone leaned in. Our barrier tech is unprecedented. The Empire's ships rely on quantum tunneling. Ours disrupts that at its foundation. Once active, nothing gets in or out unless we let it. How long can we keep it up? Indefinitely, as long as the solar stations stay active. The system draws from the sun directly. Lisa was silent. Outside, Earth turned slowly, so beautiful, so unaware of how close history stood. There's something else, she said at last. Something I haven't shared yet. The room stilled. Yesterday, a message came through our deep space relay. Fully encrypted. On channels the Empire doesn't surveil. It's from a species called the Very Across the Galaxy, from Imperial control. She activated the holoprojector. A slender, blue-skinned being with enormous black eyes appeared in the air above the table, its words translated in a calm digital voice. People of Earth, we know what fate the Empire intends for you. We cannot aid you directly. We are always watched. But listen, you are not alone. Across the stars, others like us remember freedom. Others wait. If you choose to resist, your courage will not go unseen. The galaxy watches. Show them that the Empire can be challenged. Show them that freedom still lives. The image dissolved. Silence settled. How many more are out there? Blake asked. We don't know, Morgan replied. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Species conquered but not broken. Those who still remember what liberty means. Rivera gave a grim smile. And this isn't just for Earth. It's for anyone who's ever wanted to say no to the Empire. Dr. Stone checked her watch. 68 hours until the deadline. Do we activate the barrier? Morgan looked to each of them in turn, people of brilliance and resolve. They weren't just choosing battle. They were choosing to ignite a signal fire the galaxy couldn't ignore. Send our reply to Admiral Keffer, she said steadily. Tell him that Earth's borders are now closed. No entry permitted. President Morgan turned to Dr. Stone. Doctor, activate the quantum barrier network. It's time the galaxy learned what happens when free people decide to remain free. Admiral Keffer stood silent in his command chamber as the human transmission replayed for a third time. President Morgan's voice echoed. Earth's borders are now closed. No passage allowed. His officers exchanged glances as their commanders. Scales shifted from black to deep violet, an unmistakable sign of seething rage. Impossible, Kiefer whispered. Then he roared, so loud the steel walls vibrated. Impossible. No species had ever dared utter such defiance. None had ever sealed their system from the Empire. The comms officer shrank behind her station. Admiral, perhaps? I do not. Grasped the cost of resisting. They will learn, Kiefer growled. He turned sharply. Weapons commander. Order all vessels to battle formation. We strike now. I want every human city ablaze within the hour. Sir, the officer hesitated. Our directive was to allow 72 hours. Our mission is conquest, Keffer snapped. That deadline was a courtesy, one they've now thrown away. Full assault. Show these savages the price of defiance. The Imperial Armada surged forward like a tidal wave of fire and steel. 200 warships formed into kill formations, their cannons glowing with energy sufficient to boil oceans. Keffer allowed himself a cold smile, picturing the panic on human faces as death descended. On Luna Station, Commander Alex Rivera studied the incoming fleet on her tactical display. The air thrummed with urgency, engineers rushing through final protocols. Weapons teams snapping into readiness. She had spent 20 years for this day. She knew every Imperial tactic, every weakness, every failure. Commander called Lieutenant Tom Hayes. At comes. All barrier stations report green. Dr. Stone confirms full power to the quantum grid. Rivera nodded and opened a channel to Earth. Madame President, enemy ships are assuming attack posture. Weapons range in 18 minutes. President Morgan's voice came through steady and calm. Copy that, Commander. You are cleared. To activate the barrier at your discretion? Understood. Rivera turned. Captain Wilson. Fleet status. Jake Wilson was young, but composed, calm eyes, steady hands. All ships ready, Commander. 12 heavy cruisers, 32 interceptors. Outnumbered 16-1. Rivera's voice was crisp. We only need 30 minutes. Hold the line. Once the barrier's up, the real battle starts. Far below, Dr. Rachel Stone stood inside the primary control nexus for the quantum barrier. Monitors lined the walls, streaming real-time data from orbital and deep space stations, ranged across the system. It had taken 15 years to design in secrecy. Now it was ready. Final systems check, she said aloud. Engineer Davis. Power status. Sarah Devisa, compact quick-witted, expert replied instantly. All stations running at full. Solar collectors are generating at 112% efficiency. Field generators locked and phased. We can sustain the barrier for as long as we need. Dr. Stone adjusted her headset. Commander Rivera, this is Dr. Stone. Barrier grid is prepped. Once it's live, nothing gets in or out unless we permit it. Are you sure about this? Rivera's voice was firm. Doctor, the Empire has annihilated over 2,000 civilizations. Today we show them that some of us won't die quietly. Activate the barrier. Dr. Stone's hand hovered over the control that would alter the course of history. Once pressed, Earth would sever itself from the galaxy. No trade. No signals. No outside rescue. Just humanity. And any Imperial vessels unlucky enough to be caught inside? Quantum barrier activation in 10 seconds, she called. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Activating. She pressed the control. Across the solar system, hidden stations stuck behind moons and buried in asteroid fields ignited. Each emitted a blast of quantum energy that linked seamlessly with others, forming an invisible grid enclosing the entire system. The barrier was imperceptible to normal matter and energy, but deadly to quantum tunneling, the foundation of faster-than-light travel aboard Sovereign's Edge. Admiral Keffer was finalizing his assault plan when his navigation officer shouted in panic. Admiral, all quantum drives are offline. Keffer snapped around. What are you saying, every ship, sir? Hey, their FTL system's dead. We're stuck at conventional speeds. Keffer stormed to the sensor console. The data made no sense. A field immense and alien encased the solar system entirely. Nothing in Imperial science resembled it. Try contacting command, he ordered. I can't, sir, the comms officer stammered. Quantum comms are down. The fleet's isolated. For the first time in 3 centuries of military dominance. Admiral Keffer felt something alien fear. The humans had done what he believed impossible. They had trapped the Empire's strongest fleet, caging it like beasts. From aboard the Defiance, Captain Jake Wilson watched as the Imperial ships halted mid-flight. Their formations collapsed as confusion spread, their commanders scrambling to restore lost systems. Commander Rivera, Wilson called out. The barrier's working perfectly. They're stuck. No escape. Rivera gave a cold nod.
Good.
Captain, begin Phase 2. Let's show them what human desperation looks like when paired with brilliance. Wilson's fleet, crafted for this very moment, came alive. Though dwarfed by Imperial warships, human vessels were nimble, swift, and optimized for combat within the barrier. The Empire's technological edge meant nothing now. All ships, attack pattern Delta, Wilson ordered. Strike hard, then vanish. Keep them guessing. The human fleet attacked like a thunderclap, fast, precise, and relentless. Agile craft danced around the hulking Imperial cruisers, targeting engines and gun mounts. Their speed made them impossible to track, blinking in and out of range like ghosts in the void. Imperial commander Zarkthal watched in horror as human fighters engulfed his cruiser like a swarm. They didn't meet fire with fire, they used agility and brains to hit where it hurt. Return fire, shouted, but nothing connected. The humans were too quick. One tiny fighter no bigger than a transport shuttle landed a direct hit on his main thrusters. Another destroyed his comms. Third disabled long-range sensors. Within moments, his mighty ship was nothing but a drifting shell. Admiral Keffer's dread deepened. His fleet was built to intimidate or obliterate. But the humans would not cower in. They refused conventional battle. They had turned the Empire's greatest weapons into liabilities. Sir, said the tactical officer, voice tight, we've lost 47 ships in this first engagement. Human losses appear minimal. Kiefer's jaw clenched. How is that possible? Know this territory, sir? They know where to hide, where to strike, where to disappear. And without FTL drives, we can't pursue. Kafir stared at the glowing tactical map, his fleet scattered and unsure, while agile human ships slipped between them like wolves hunting wounded giants. For the first time in the Empire's history, a fleet had been ensnared by the very people they came to subjugate. Get me a full damage report, Admiral Keffer barked, and find out how long our supplies will last. If this barrier holds, we may be stuck here far longer than planned. The logistics officer's report was worse than expected. The fleet carried provisions for a swift victory, perhaps 3 months' worth, assuming easy conquest and fast resupply. Now, stranded and cut off from all aid, they faced a drawn-out siege with no exit. On Earth, President Morgan listened to the combat updates with calm resolve. Phase 1 had succeeded flawlessly. The invincible fleet of the Empire was trapped, disoriented, and suffering steady losses, while humanity's damage remained minor. "Madame President," came Rivera's voice. "Imperial ships are regrouping near Jupiter. Looks like they're digging in." "Let them," Morgan answered. "Time favors us now. Each passing day weakens them and strengthens us." In every moment broadcasts across the stars, the Empire is not invincible. Dr. Stone joined in from her command bunker, the barriers holding without issue. "Their weapons haven't scratched the generators. Can't escape, and we can hold this for as long as necessary." President Morgan studied the holographic battlefield, where dozens of once mighty Imperial ships drifted like cornered beasts in a trap of humanity's making. "Then it's time to show the galaxy what happens when free people stand their ground." 3 weeks had passed since Admiral Kether's fleet was sealed inside the solar system, the proud Imperial Armada. Once roaming space-like emperors, now clung to defensive formations around Jupiter, their crews growing more desperate with each passing day. Food rations were dwindling. Some ships had already powered down non-essentials to conserve energy. Captain Maria Santos piloted the Midnight Runner, weaving through the asteroid fields between Mars and Jupiter. Her 12-person crew had volunteered for the riskiest mission yet, boarding an Imperial supply vessel to seize critical intel and resources. Santos, raised in the slums of Mexico City, had learned how to survive when the odds were stacked hand. Knew the Empire's pampered officers had no such experience. "Target in sight," whispered her pilot, Lieutenant Dave Park. "Imperial supply ship Karthik. Minimal power signatures. Crew around 2,000. Low activity." Santos peered through her scope. The massive ship lumbered through space, clearly rationing energy and oxygen. "They're conserving everything. That's exactly what we hoped for." Midnight Runner maneuvered into a blind spot near the Karthik's engine section, an exploitable flaw Santos had found by studying captured Imperial schematics. Empire ships were engineered to dominate, not defend subtly. "Remember the plan," Santos said to her boarding team. "Quick in, quick out. Take what we need. No unnecessary bloodshed, but stay sharp." Clad in captured Imperial environment suits taken from prisoners in previous raids, the human team moved through the airlock. Their disguises would grant precious seconds before guards realized the truth. Meanwhile, on Luna Station, Commander Rivera sifted through reports of similar operations. Infiltration teams had boarded 17 Imperial vessels so far, gathering tactical data, analyzing enemy tech, identifying growing unrest among the Imperial ranks. "Commander," said LT. "Hayes, we've received another surrender request. This time from the destroyer Black Talon. They want to trade weapons for food and medical aid." Rivera didn't flinch. It was the 5th surrender request that week. The Empire had never taught its troops to endure long isolation or survive. Without their vast logistical web, "Accept it," Rivera said. "Send Captain Wilson to escort them to the Ceres holding zone. Treat the crew well, but don't let them out of your sight." Far beneath the Rockies, Dr. Rachel Stone worked feverishly in her lab. She had uncovered something extraordinary while analyzing salvaged Imperial hardware. The barrier could be selectively tuned, rather than sealing the system entirely. She could open tiny passageways, allowing certain vessels to pass while trapping. Others, "Engineer Davis, take a look." Stone called Sarah Davis hurried over, its eyes locking onto the holographic equations. "This is incredible," she breathed. "We could reopen communication lines, let allies through while keeping Imperial ships locked out." "Exactly," Stone nodded. "And there's more." She adjusted the projection to reveal a tactical overlay. "We can also use the field itself as a weapon, disabling specific ships inside. Target their quantum cores directly. Strand some, free others. Control every engagement." Were staggering. Humanity had unlocked a technology that could reshape the nature of interstellar war, giving them control not only over movement, but also over commerce, supply lines, and the very boundaries of empires, aboard the Imperial supply. Ship Carrick, Captain Maria Santos and her infiltration team crept through dim, near-silent corridors toward the cargo bay. The air was thin, lighting minimal. Entire decks had been shut down to conserve dwindling resources. Santos felt a flicker of pity. These soldiers had expected swift victory now they were dying by inches in the dark. Movement up ahead, warned Sergeant Bill Cooper, eyes scanning forward. 2 guards outside the cargo bay? Santos peered through her scope. The guards looked weak, malnourished. Gone was the aura of invincibility that once surrounded the Empire's warriors. Take them quietly. No alarms. Cooper and Private Lisa Wright moved like ghosts through the shadows. The guards never had a chance. Within seconds, they were unconscious, died, and stashed in a nearby maintenance closet. Inside the cargo bay, Santos found exactly what she'd hoped: star charts mapping Imperial territory, communication relays capable of reaching other stranded ships, and most critically, a comprehensive database of fleet codes and encrypted channels. "Jackpot," whispered Wright, downloading the files. "This is worth more than any battle." But then came the true prize, tucked in a sealed section of the bay. Dozens of crates filled with Imperial food concentrates and advanced medical packs, enough to support her crew for months. More importantly, it confirmed a bitter truth: Imperial officers were hoarding supplies while their own crews starved. "Take everything," Santos ordered, "and leave a gift behind." Before departing, her team placed covert transmitters throughout the ship. These would relay Imperial communications and fuel a growing campaign of psychological warfare. On the Sovereign's edge, Admiral Keffer paced his command deck like a lion in a cage. Reports came in from all over the fleet. Chaos, low morale, unexpected raids. 17 ships boarded, 5 surrendered, dozens damaged, and now something even worse. Admiral, his intelligence chief, reported, "We have a new issue." Creature's 6 hands twitched nervously. Unauthorized transmissions are spreading across the fleet. They appear to be human. "What kind of transmissions?" Kiefer growled. "Propaganda, sir. Human voices speaking in multiple dialects, offering food, medicine, safety, promising fair treatment to those who surrender." The Admiral's scales darkened. "Shut it down. We've tried. The signals originate from multiple ships. The humans planted transmitters during their raids. We can't find them all." It was unprecedented. For the first time in Imperial history, enemy propaganda wasn't outside the gates. It was inside their ships, reaching soldiers directly. The damage was psychological and spreading fast. Soldiers once loyal to the death were now whispering about choice, about freedom. Captain Jake Wilson commanded a fleet that included both human ships and surrendered Imperial ones. His flagship, the Defiance, had become a hub for joint operations. Former enemies now worked alongside humans, retrofitting their vessels with Earth tech and providing valuable insight into Imperial doctrine. "Captain, we've got a situation," said his tactical officer. "Long-range sensors are picking up incoming ship slots of them." Wilson stared at the data. 3 Imperial battle groups, closing fast from outside the solar system. It had to be reinforcements responding to Admiral Keffer's last message. "Before the barrier went up, when do they arrive?" 6 days, sir. At current speed, Wilson immediately opened a secure channel. "Commander Rivera, we've got company inbound. A lot of company." Her reply came without hesitation. "Understood, Captain. Dr. Stone's new barrier settings should resist outside attacks, but prepare for the worst." "How many?" 60 heavy warships, maybe more behind them." The message was clear. The barrier had proven impenetrable from the inside, but an assault from beyond might be different. If the Empire breached it, humanity would face overwhelming firepower. On Earth, President Morgan gathered her senior command for an emergency session. The situation had shifted. Yes, they had successfully crippled one Imperial fleet. But now, a second, larger force was en route. "Options?" she asked. Her voice level, Defense Secretary John Blake spoke first. We could negotiate. To offer to return Admiral Keffer's fleet in exchange for Imperial withdrawal. Commander Rivera's voice came in through hololink. That assumes they'll talk. Doctrine says rebellion must be crushed completely. Don't negotiate. They retaliate. It's probably coming to make an example of us, Rivera said grimly. But Dr. Rachel Stone had another idea. Madam President, my recent barrier modifications may give us more than defense. The Imperial reinforcement fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a tidal wave of steel and fire. Admiral Vekmer, commanding from the bridge of the Eternal Dominance, a vessel so large it could house entire cities, led 63 heavy battleships and more than 200 support vessels, all primed to obliterate Earth's rebellion. Admiral reported his sensor officer, a tall, four-eyed creature with violet skin. There's an energy field surrounding the system. It's interfering with quantum communication and faster-than-light travel. Vekmer frowned, examining the readings. What of Admiral Keffer's fleet? We detect Imperial vessels inside, but none respond to hails. Impossible. Admiral Keffer commands 200 warships. How could primitives disable such a force? The answer came moments later as President Lisa Morgan appeared via direct transmission. Her face was calm, voice composed. Admiral Vekmer, I'm President Morgan of Earth. Admiral Keffer and what remains of his fleet are currently. Guess you have one chance to leave peacefully. Vekmer's scales flushed with rage. Human, you will surrender immediately. Release Admiral Keffer and his ships, or I will burn your world to ash. I'm afraid that's not an option, Morgan replied. You see, Admiral? Earth's borders are closed. No passage means no passage. Turn around now, or join your colleague in permanent orbit. The transmission ended. Vekmer stared at the blank screen, speechless. No species had ever addressed an Imperial commander with such dismissive defiance. All ships, attack formation. He growled. We're breaking through that barrier. We'll reduce their cities to rubble. But Earth was prepared. Beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Stone tracked the incoming fleet's movement from her control center. Engineer Davis, she said, eyes locked on the display. Begin the expansion sequence on my mark. Ready. Dr. Barrier can extend at light speed. They won't see it coming. Mark. In an instant, the barrier pulsed and surged outward like an invisible shockwave. Before Vekmer's fleet could react, it engulfed them completely. Quantum drives failed. Communications fell silent. What just happened? Vekmer shouted. Sir, came the reply. We're trapped. All FTL systems disabled. Quantum links are offline. We're inside the barrier. For the first time in 4 centuries of war, Admiral Vekmer felt real fear. Humanity had trapped the Empire's greatest fleet effortlessly. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Jake Wilson watched the chaos unfold on his tactical display. The Second Imperial Fleet was now just as helpless as the first. The human fleet had grown to 47 ships, including 28 former Imperial vessels, now operated by defectors who had chosen freedom over tyranny. Captain, said his comms officer, the new fleet is trying to reach Admiral Keffer's forces. Let them, Wilson replied. They might learn something. Learn they did. Admiral Keffer, once a legend among the stars, described how humanity had outsmarted him, how they'd shattered morale, outmaneuvered his fleets, and used propaganda with stunning effect. He told Vekmer of the raids, the captured data, the food stolen from under their noses, and how prisoners were treated not with cruelty, respect. But the revelation that stunned Vekmer came last. Many of our soldiers, Keffer said, have joined the humans. Freely. Possible, Vekmer snapped. Imperial loyalty is absolute. So I believed, Keffer replied, voice heavy with experience. Until I met a people who gave something the Empire never has choice. But not all Imperials had given up. Colonel Steve Baker led a critical mission aboard a captured Imperial shuttle. Intelligence from the raids had revealed Admiral Vekmer's contingency plan. If Earth could not be taken, he intended to crash the Eternal Dominance into the planet, triggering a blast that would kill billions. Now, Baker and his squad approached. The colossal warship using stolen codes. From up close, the vessel loomed, like a city-sized fortress in the dark its armored skin, lined with massive cannons, shield arrays, and hundreds of hangars. Getting inside would be next to impossible. Impossible. But Baker had come to understand a critical truth about Imperial culture. Their greatest strength, obedience, was also their greatest weakness. Remember, he told his team as their shuttle docked with the Eternal Dominance. Imperial soldiers don't ask questions. They obey without thinking. That's our way in. Dressed in flawless Imperial uniforms and carrying forged inspection orders, Baker's team made their way through security unchallenged. As he'd expected, no one questioned their presence. Deep within the massive ship, the team reached the engine control chamber. Inside, Admiral Vekmer was preparing to override the reactor's safety systems. His plan: detonate the vessel's quantum core and annihilate Earth in a single act of vengeance. "You can't do this," Baker said as he stepped inside. VACM were turned, stunned to see humans in his control room. "How did you get on my ship?" "We walked," Baker replied. "Your crew let us in because we acted like we belonged." "That's your problem, Admiral. Your people follow orders. Ours think for themselves." Vekmer's hand darted toward his weapon, but Baker was faster, drawing his sidearm and leveling it. "You're too late," Vekmer hissed. "The overload has already begun. In 10 minutes, this ship becomes a new sun." "Then I guess we've got 10 minutes to convince you to stop," Baker replied, weapon steady. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Morgan faced a nightmare scenario. Long range. Scans confirmed the Eternal Dominance was preparing to explode with enough force to shatter continents. Dr. Rachel Stone stood by with a possible solution. "We can use the barrier to contain the blast," she explained. "But it would require us to lower the field across the rest of the system. The other Imperial ships could escape and warn the Empire. And if we don't contain the blast," Morgan asked quietly. "Then Earth burns," Dr. Stone answered. Commander Rivera offered a third desperate option. "Could evacuate as many people as possible to the colonies. Save humanity." Morgan looked at the displurths. Swirling blues and greens, home to 3 billion unsuspecting lives. "No," she said. "We don't run. We don't hide. We find another way." That's when everything changed. Across the solar system, Imperial vessels began broadcasting unexpected messages. Surrender, mutiny, pleas for asylum. On board the Midnight Runner, Captain Maria Santos listened in disbelief. "Commander Rivera, you need to hear this," she said. "They're turning on him. Imperial crews are refusing to carry out Vekmer's suicide order." "What?" Rivera replied, stunned. "Some ships are even en route to stop him themselves. They're calling the plan madness. They say they won't. Die for the Empire's pride." Inside the Eternal Dominance, Colonel Baker stood firm. "Look around, Admiral," he said. "Your own fleet is abandoning you. They've finally seen the truth that the Empire is willing to sacrifice everyone, including its own, to avoid admitting failure." Vekmer's hand trembled. Alarms blared in the background as the countdown ticked toward destruction. "You've already lost," Baker continued. "Your enemies think for themselves. Your allies are leaving you behind. You're alone, Admiral. No empire, no glory, just a dead rock and a failed legacy." For a long moment, Vekmer stood silent. Then, slowly, he reached for the override. With a hiss of steam and a flickering display, the core countdown halted. Outside, human and mutinous Imperial ships waited with bated breath. When the core stabilized, cheers erupted across frequencies in dozens of languages. Admiral Vekmer stepped back from the controls, breathing hard. "I don't understand," he muttered. "Why show me mercy?" Baker lowered his weapon. "Because unlike your empire, we believe in second chances." On Earth, President Morgan received the update. The overload had been stopped. Barrier remained intact. The Empire's reinforcements had mutinied. "Madame President, Commander Rivera reported. We may have just won." Morgan nodded slowly. "No," she said. "Just gave the galaxy permission to hope again." The final image broadcast from Earth's network showed the two trapped. Imperial fleets, once symbols of invincibility, now disarmed, leaderless, and humbled. But more importantly, Messages from across the stars were arriving, species long silenced. By fear began reaching out, tentative, cautious, but curious. The ripple had begun. Humanity hadn't just saved Earth, they'd sparked the beginning of a galactic revolution. Raised again instantly if any hostile action was detected, humanity would offer sanctuary but not weakness. On board the Eternal Dominance, Admiral Vekmer sat silently in a secured cabin aboard a human escort ship, watching Earth rotate slowly below. He had stopped the detonation, but now faced a future he had never imagined, one without orders, one without certainty. A nurse entered and offered food. He stared at it, hesitated, and then accepted with a quiet nod. For the first time in 4 centuries, he was being treated not as a tool of conquest, but as a person. President Morgan addressed the galaxy again from Luna Station. Her face was broadcast to hundreds of systems via the modified quantum relay system, now capable of secure selective transmission. To the peoples of the galaxy, she began, Earth has chosen freedom, not just for ourselves, but for anyone who seeks it. We do not want war. We do not want conquest. But we will never again bow to tyranny. The barrier will remain open for all who come in peace. To those who come with chains, know this: you will find none here. The message rippled outward, reaching worlds that had lived under imperial shadow for generations. On the desert world of Thraxos, where speaking against the Empire meant death, underground leaders wept openly as they watched the broadcast. On the frozen mining colonies of Drax 7, slaves paused in their labor as stolen receivers played Morgan's words on loop. Across dozens of systems, rebellions sparked to life. Dr. Rachel Stone watched the quantum relay pulses cascade across the stars. "We've done it," she whispered. "We've opened the door." Back on Luna Station, Commander Rivera reviewed a staggering flood of incoming request ships seeking asylum. Messages from secret resistance groups, even defecting. Imperial officers offering intelligence in exchange for protection. She stood beside a growing wall of names. Imperial citizens and soldiers who had laid down their arms and chosen a new path. She added one more. Vekmer, Admiral, former commander, status, undecided. "Let's hope he makes the right decision," she said quietly. Colonel Baker returned to Earth a hero, though he refused medals or parades. "I didn't win the war," he told a journalist. Vekmer did by choosing to stop it. Humanity began converting Imperial ships into refugee transports and colony vessels. With the Empire's blockade shattered, entire regions of the galaxy once cut off by fear began reconnecting. Trade routes reopened. Secret languages spoken only in whispers now rang through open channels. Dr. Stone's research accelerated. Help from surrendered Imperial engineers. She and her team developed a way to weave the quantum barrier into a defensive mesh, protecting Earth without isolating it. For the first time in history, a planetary defense could decide who to let in, not by force, but by trust. Maria Santos's Midnight Runner now led a new unit, the Freedom Fleet. Composed of mixed cruise human and former Imperial, they carried food, medical aid, and hope to embattled worlds. No longer raiders, they were liberators. On one mission, they landed on a moon where children had never seen stars. Maria sat with a group of them and pointed upward. "That," she said, "is what freedom looks like." Within a year, over 300 alien worlds had declared neutrality or active resistance against the Empire. Its once fractured enemies were now forming alliances. Diplomats from Earth once unrecognized were now welcomed as honored guests across entire sectors. The word human became synonymous with hope, but Earth did not forget the cost. Our memorial was built on Luna, inscribed with the names of every human and alien who died during the conflict. Beneath it, in a quiet chamber, a single phrase stood in every known language. "Freedom is the choice to make choices." Admiral Vekmer eventually requested a meeting with President Morgan. They spoke privately for 3 hours. No transcript was ever released. But afterward, Vekmer declined asylum, declined to return to the Empire, and requested instead to remain on a distant human colony anonymously. Its only condition, that he be allowed to plant trees. He now tends an orchard on the edge of a grassy plain under a blue sky, watched over by no one. Children come sometimes and ask about the empire. He never speaks of conquest, only of choices. President Morgan stood once more in the command chamber beneath the Rocky Mountains. Beside her, Rivera, Stone, and Blake. Outside, Earth turned slowly through space. The stars no longer looked like threats. They looked like destinations. "We were never meant to rule the galaxy," she said, "just to remind it what freedom feels like." And across those stars, millions now remembered. Terran Alliance, as the growing coalition called itself, now included dozens of species and hundreds of planets once under Imperial rule. It was no longer just a human rebellion. It was a galactic revolution. President Morgan stood before a delegation of ambassadors from across the stars. The Great Hall on Luna Station, once used for military briefings, had been transformed into a forum for diplomacy. Representatives from the Veracelt, Threx, and more than 30 other species sat in a semicircle around her. Some had scales, some feathers, some eyes that glowed like fire, but all had come seeking the same thing: freedom. "The Terran Alliance is not an empire," Morgan said firmly. "We will never demand tribute. We will never send armies to conquer. We offer cooperation, defense, and dignity. Any world that chooses freedom is welcome on their own terms." Thunderous applause echoed through the chamber. Meanwhile, Admiral Maria Santos stood aboard her flagship Liberator, reviewing sensor data from the Kelton system. The Empire's retaliatory strike force was larger than expected: 20 destroyers and 6 dreadnoughts. But Santos was ready. "Deploy the fleet," she ordered. "Defensive wedge formation. Target dreadnought engines first. Cripple, don't destroy. I want their crews alive to see what real courage looks like." Her fleet jumped into Kelton space moments later. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a rout. Using their superior maneuverability and intimate knowledge of Imperial tactics, the Earth Defense Fleet dismantled the enemy squadron in under 20 minutes. 6 Imperial ships surrendered. 3 were disabled. The rest fled. Kelton citizens, many of whom had never seen a non-Imperial warship, cheered as human vessels landed on their surface with supplies and medical aid. For the first time in generations, they were not alone. Back on Earth, Dr. Rachel Stone's lab had become the hub of technological innovation for the Alliance. With help from Vari scientists and former Imperial engineers, she developed mobile quantum barriers that could be deployed by individual ships, rendering them immune to quantum disruption. These ships could pierce Imperial blockade fields with ease, changing the face of interstellar conflict. Her most ambitious project, however, was even more revolutionary: a communications lattice woven through the barrier system, enabling instant, secure coordination between Alliance worlds. "They used isolation to control us," she said to her team. "We're going to use unity to free everyone." Admiral Kether, still living on Luna Station, now served as a liaison between former Imperial officers and Alliance leadership. His insights had been critical in convincing many Imperial holdouts to defect. He taught at the newly established Terran Defense Academy, where recruits from across the galaxy trained together. His favorite lesson: obedience makes armies, understanding makes allies. In one class, a young Threx cadet asked him, "Why did you switch sides?" He paused before answering. "Because they gave me the one thing I had never been given in my entire career: the freedom to choose." President Morgan's vision was becoming reality. The Terran Alliance wasn't just military, it was political, cultural, spiritual, art. From liberated worlds adorned museums on Earth, music from alien species filled human concert halls, trade flourished. Fears faded. Children born after the battle for Earth would grow up thinking multi-species cooperation was normal, but not. Everyone in the galaxy embraced the new order. A fragment of the Empire remained, bitter and isolated in a corner of the Orion Arm, led by warlords and exiled admirals. It struck at weak worlds and border settlements. But each time, the Alliance responded faster, stronger, more united. No longer a single planet defying an empire now, hundreds stood together. One such world, Talarin Prime. called for aid after an Imperial remnant landed to reassert control. Admiral Santos responded personally. Her fleet arrived during a storm in the planet's upper atmosphere. The locals looked up through thunder and saw Earth ships break through the clouds like falling stars within an hour. Talrin Prime was free. On the 10th anniversary of the Earth stand, President Morgan addressed the Alliance Council. Gray now touched her temples, but her voice carried the same fire. We once thought we were alone in the universe, just a small world in a vast sea. But we've learned something profound. Freedom is not a human concept, it is a universal longing. And when even one voice refuses to be silenced, others will join it. That is how we won. She paused, then smiled. And that is how we will build something better. A statue was erected in the Hall of Worlds, a human hand reaching out, not closed in a fist, but open in invitation. Beneath it, a plaque read, included 47 different species, working together as equals. Unlike the Empire's forced unity, the Alliance was held together by shared values and mutual respect. Admiral Vecmer had chosen to remain on Earth, dedicating himself to designing new defensive systems for Alliance worlds. His deep knowledge of Imperial strategy and technology proved invaluable in protecting newly free planets from retaliation. He had finally found purpose in building instead of destroying. President Morgan, I've completed the analysis you requested, Deco reported during a routine security briefing. The insectoid strategist gestured toward a holomap showing regions of instability. The Empire's remaining strength is now concentrated in 12 core systems. They cannot maintain control over their outer territories without constantly shifting fleets to suppress uprisings. Meaning? Morgan asked, her eyes narrowing. Meaning the Empire is dying? Decker said simply. They built their power on fear. But fear only works if people believe resistance is impossible. You proved resistance isn't just possible, it can win. It can't recover from that. President Morgan stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, humanity's first major construction project beyond the solar system. Through the transparent dome, she watched ships from dozens of species arrive and depart in peace. Children of former imperial slaves played in public gardens. Scientists, engineers, and workers from every background collaborated in labs and command centers. Former enemies were now equals, working side by side to build something better than either could have imagined alone. Commander Rivera stepped quietly beside her, hands clasped behind her back. Hard to believe it's only been a year since we closed Earth's borders. We didn't just close our borders, Morgan replied, eyes fixed on a drifting humanitarian cruiser. We opened the galaxy's eyes to what freedom actually looks like. Rivera nodded. The Empire's requesting a formal peace conference now. They want to negotiate territorial boundaries. Morgan laughed softly. Tell them our position hasn't changed. Earth's borders stay closed to slavers, but open to anyone who comes in peace. If they want peace, they can start by freeing the people they still hold captive. And if they refuse, then we keep doing what we're doing. Every world that chooses freedom makes the next one easier to liberate. Eventually, they'll run out of slaves to rule, as if summoned by their words. Captain Wilson's voice came over the station's communications network. Attention all personnel. Incoming delegation through the Quantum Gateway. The Zephyrian system has officially voted to join the Terran Alliance. Admiral Santos is escorting their leadership now. Morgan turned her gaze to the gateway as it shimmered with cascading light. A convoy of Zephyrian ships emerged, sleek and iridescent. Symbols of their newfound independence proudly displayed on their hulls. Inside those ships were people who had risked everything, abandoning the familiarity of servitude for the uncertain promise of liberty. They've made the leap, Rivera said, voice soft with wonder. Same leap we did, back when we stood alone? Morgan nodded slowly. You know what the most incredible part is? What? We never set out to conquer anyone. We didn't want to build an empire. We just wanted to be left alone. Oh. Live free. But by defending that freedom fiercely, without compromise, We accidentally built something better than any empire ever could. The Zephyrion convoy docked. Doors opened. Former enemies stepped into the station and were welcomed. Not with suspicion, but with outstretched hands. Representatives of species once divided by bloodshed now shared greetings, laughter, and hope. President Morgan watched the scene unfold. Rebels turned leaders, conquerors turned protectors, strangers turned allies. The Terran Alliance had no throne, no emperor, only an idea, simple but unstoppable. Freedom belongs to everyone who dares to claim it.